In 1980, a Brazilian director went into the slums of São Paulo and the juvenile detention centers of Brazil and found his cast there. Not actors, not kids who had studied acting, kids who were living in the story he wanted to tell. One of them was a 10-year-old boy named Fernando Ramos da Silva. Fernando had never been on a film set. He didn't know what a director was. He was just a kid from the streets who showed up and became something extraordinary on camera. The film made him famous overnight. His famous face was on the cover of magazines. People called him a discovery, a revelation. 9 years later, da Silva was shot and killed by police in a dispute incident in the same neighborhood he came from. He was 19 years old. This is the story of Pixote, and it's one of the most heartbreaking true stories in the history of cinema. Everything you're about to hear is sourced from documented film history and published accounts. Hector Bembenco was an Argentina born film director working in Brazil in the late 1970s. He wanted to make a film about something the Brazilian government preferred people not to look at directly: the children falling through the cracks of the system. Street children, juvenile offenders, kids who had been failed by every institution that was supposed to protect them had to end up in a detention center that they were more dangerous than anything that was on the outside. But Benko didn't want actors. He wanted truth. So he went into the juvenile detention centers and impoverished communities across Sao Paulo and held workshops, looking for kids who could carry this story not because they had learned it, because they had lived it. Fernando de Ramos was one of the 9 children growing up in an extreme poverty in Diadema, one of the most dangerous municipalities in San Pablo State. When Babanco found him, Fernando was 10 years old. No acting experience, no training, just a kid with a face that the camera couldn't look away from, and a life that had already taught him more about survival than most adults ever learn. But Benko cast him as Pixote, a young boy swept into the juvenile system and then into a criminal world beyond it, a child navigating a world designed to consume him. And Fernando didn't act the role. He had inhibited it because the distance between Fernando's real life and Pixote's fictional one was almost nothing at all. Pixote came out in 1991, and unlike anything Brazilian cinema had ever produced before, it follows Pixote and a group of boys through the brutal reality of Brazilian's juvenile detention center, violence, corruption, and abuse, and then out into the streets where things get worse, not better. The film doesn't look away from any of it, but Benko's shoot is like a documentary. Handheld cameras, real location, real faces. The line between fiction and reality almost completely erased. International critics were stunned. The film won awards across Europe. Roger Ebert called it one of the greatest films of the year, and Fernando da Silva became famous overnight. Here's where the story gets devastating. Fame found Fernando, but it couldn't follow him home. Because home was still Diadema, the poverty was still there, the circumstances were still there. The world of Pixote depicted on screen was still the world Fernando lived in every day. He tried to continue acting. He got a few small roles, but the opportunity dried up the way they do for child actors, especially child actors with no industry connections, no agent, no family with resources to navigate the world for them. By his late teens, Fernando was back in Diadema, back in the environment that the film had briefly lifted him out of. In 1987, a journalist tracked him down for an interview. Fernando was 17. He was already back in the streets, already in trouble. He said that he felt abandoned, that the film had used him and moved on. He said, "I am Pixote. I always was." On August 25, 1989, Fernando da Silva was killed by police in Diadema. He was 19 years old. The official account said he was shot during a confrontation. People who knew him and advocates who follow his case dispute the circumstances. In Brazil in 1989, in neighborhoods like Diadema, the line between justice and execution was not always clear. What is clear is this: a boy was found by a filmmaker, his face put on screen and shown to the world. The world praised the film and moved on, and the boy went back to the streets that made him. Hector Babenco later said that making Pixote was one of the most important things he ever did. He also carries the weight of what happened to Fernando for the rest of his life. The film exposed a system that was failing children, and then that same system consumed the child who had exposed it. Pixote is considered one of the greatest Latin American films ever made. It influenced City of God. It influenced Sin Nombre. It changed how filmmakers thought about casting non-actors and telling the story from inside the communities rather than about them. But the legend of Pixote is still inseparable from Fernando, because every time someone watches that film and sees that face, that 10-year-old face that couldn't lie to the camera, they're watching a real person, a real life, a real story that didn't end the way that it should have. That's what makes Pixote different from any other film on this channel. The story didn't stay on the screen. It actually followed him home. Pixote is available to rent on major platforms. As a matter of fact, I just found out today you can watch it for free on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description. Watching it knowing who Fernando Ramos was. Watch it knowing what happened after. And if you find yourself thinking about him after the credits roll, that's the point. That's what Babanco wanted. That's what Fernando gave us, whether he knew it or not. The Real Unseen. The film's worth watching. Thank you. Please like and subscribe.